Hey, this is Nettie with Rocket Powered Sound. In this video, I'm going to be showing you 5 sound design shortcuts and tricks that I use in my regular production. Let's just jump straight into it. So I have like a little project laid out here with some samples to just demonstrate the points that I'm talking about. All these samples are from the Ultimate Sample Pack from Rocket Powered Sound. They're just from the Iconic EDM section. I think one of them is also from like the hip hop or pop section, but all of them are from the same sample pack. So if you want access to these samples, then go ahead and check out the link in the description. But let's get into it. Alright, so the first tip is to bass boost something into an amp. So let me play back the sample for you and then you can kind of see what I mean. Here's what the sample sounds like without any effects on it. Just these two little whomps. And when I add an amp to it, it sounds like this. Sounds a lot more gnarly right off the bat. I love using amp. It's like one of my favorite effects of all time. It's a stock Ableton thing, so if you're not an Ableton, then this tip doesn't really apply to you, maybe. But maybe there's something similar in the DAW that you use if you don't use Ableton. But with amp specifically on the heavy mode, what you can do is there's kind of an interesting effect that happens that once you boost your sub past a certain point, you get like the subs kind of starts taking over the sound. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if I just play this back over and over again and then like start boosting the bass like this, you'll see what I mean. It just kind of becomes more and more bass, and if I do the opposite, right, if I lower it, it just becomes like more of the mid content. And so what I like to do is just like bass boost the crap out of this into an amp sometimes to kind of control how like tight the sound is. And I'll do this all the time. Like it's such a great like little sound design trick to just make any sound either tighter or just more distorted and like gnarly sounding, and it's just a great little trick. And then yeah, applying the same trick to the second sample. Again, like really cool sounds. You could either like up the scale so that it goes further and then like maybe widen it a bit. You can really see how like it does like completely take over the sound. Like you can't even hear the mid frequencies anymore. But yeah, that's tip number 1. Let's move on to tip number 2. So tip number 2 is a frequency split rack. So I have this custom rack that I made, and this is super simple, so you can do this as well. And it's called the frequency split rack. So let me play back this little sample for you. This is the shake bass loop, and it sounds like this. Very cool. So let me get the frequency split rack on here. And so what this does is I have these 2 parallel chains set up, one called high end and one called low end. And what these do is you can kind of think of it as like layers. So it's the same thing as going like this almost, but then it's in just one effects channel. So I have 2 chains set up called, yeah, high end and low end. The low end one, as you can imagine, is the low end and vice versa. And then, yeah, I have the high end split here. And so what this allows me to do is to take a frequency shifter or just any effect that I want really, and only affect the high end without touching the sub at all. So I can start doing is I can just shift this like all the way up, for example, and it's going to keep the sub there, so it's going to still sound coherent. Also, this is really cool. Or we can shift it down. Not as cool in my opinion. But yeah, like you can kind of do a lot with that. Let's say we shift it up, right? And we can just add like some effects, maybe some spectral time. And we still got that pristine sub. And you might not hear this if you're on the phone speakers, but yeah. It just remains a clean sound. Now if I were to take this and plop it just like without this, you can hear it sounds pretty bad. So yeah, pretty great little trick that I like to use all the time. Super easy and super quick. So yeah, let's move on to the next tip. And the next tip is using a fat rack. Now, this is a bit more of a personal one, and I do want to like keep kind of the details of the exact fat rack that I have kind of like a bit more personalized. But it's more the concept that I'm trying to demonstrate here. So my fat rack, I use this all the time because it just consists of mostly like OTTs and saturators and stuff like that, like overdrives, things like that. And what that helps you do is I mean, obviously, like if I turn this off, oh right, let me play the dry sample for you real quick. Very cool. And then yeah, if I had a fat rack, I mean you can immediately hear it. It's pretty ridiculous, obviously, but you know, I can start tweaking like some of the knobs on here. For example, timed. Like if I turn this all the way down, then it's a lot more intense. Or if I turn it all the way up, a little bit less intense. If I turn the fat all the way down, it still affects the sound, as you can hear. But it's just a little bit more subtle, so I still do that all the time. There's a lot of things that my own Fat Rack allows me to do that you can't really get out of like one single effect. Having your own Fat Rack is a great way to just beef up your sounds quickly, and it's I could not make half the music that I make without that Fat Rack. So yeah, it's absolutely goated. I love it. I love using it. All it is just a chain of effects that I could just consistently add over and over again in the same exact way. And this also just forms like a little signature sound over time if it's like the same, like recognizable enough effects. So yeah, that's also a neat little side effect if you use the same like production techniques over and over again. But yeah, anyway, that's what I do with my Fat Rack. So let's move on to the next tip. So tip number 4 is using redux or erosion to create noise on your like samples. So we have this little melody loop right here, and it sounds like this. Pretty simple, but what you can do is if you take a redux and you turn down the bits, you'll start, like, when I start mixing this in, you'll notice, like, it'll start to sound, like, it'll start to add some, like, noise to the high end. So watch this. And the more I do it, the more intense it gets, and past a certain point, you're gonna hear it sounds pretty bad. But it's a cool effect, right? And what I'd use this for all the time is like for like pads like this, I just add some noise, and it makes it sound so much more like, not necessarily organic, but it really adds that element of like it feeling like a weathered, like maybe like a vinyl record or something like that. That you know, I really like that effect. So I do this all the time, and you can do kind of a similar effect with erosion. It's not the same thing by any means, but because you can hear it has a bit of a different texture to it. But yeah, and then something else, like especially if it's like an atmospheric kind of loop like this, I like to, if I'm using erosion for this, I like to take some spectral time and just like turn up the spray a little bit, and then that like smears the sound out a bit, so it's like smooths out the rough texture that we have so it goes from this to this. So I like doing that all the time. It's good stuff. But yeah, just adding just that tiny bit of noise is a great little tip. So let's move on to tip number 5. So tip number 5 is to take a vocoder and use it to like kind of, I don't know how to describe it other than like whoosh out like a sound. Let's give it a little demonstration, right? So this is a bass loop. Let me play it for you. Very nice. Now, when you take a vocoder and you put it on the modulator noise, it'll kind of like, I don't know what it does exactly, but it does some stuff that allows you to basically like almost make it sound a bit more watery. So we went from this to this immediately. Let me add a little utility so it's a little bit louder. So it can be really cool. Like in this instance, I feel like it takes away from the punch just a little bit, so we can maybe tweak it a little bit. So let's just play it back like this maybe. I changed the range a little bit to include like some of the sub end, because my default like vocoder preset has like a weird range set to it that doesn't include the sub. And then maybe we could change the bands as well. And so maybe we could take out some of the distorting like frequencies. Now we've kind of like almost made it a bit more watery, right? And so maybe we can turn out the release as well. This is also like a way to make it more watery. Maybe turn up the depth. Ooh! Just add a little OTT just to kind of like, you know, like emphasize it a little bit. Oh, that is absolutely disgusting. In the best ways. I like it. Alternatively, you can turn the depth like all the way down. Also an interesting effect, or you can turn up to like the formant as well. Listen to that. Vocoders are just really awesome, and there's just like so many cool little like settings you can tweak, but I just like using it sometimes to like kind of like make sounds like a bit more tight. And this is, you can like kind of follow this up as well with like the little amp bass boost trick to make it even tighter. So like if we have if we like have just this and I just bass boost without the vocoder, it would sound like this, which is obviously way more aggressive than this. So yeah, anyway, it's a cool effect. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Those are the 5 things I use in my everyday production, and I hope you were able to learn something from it. Remember to check out the Ultimate Sample Pack with a link in the description, and I'll see you in another video. Bye-bye.